tell you about one of my heroines, Frances Perkins. She was the Secretary of Labor under FDR, the first woman to be in the U.S. cabinet. And one of the most formative experiences of her life was in New York City, near Washington Square, when she was walking down the street near some factories, some sweatshop factories that were then there and now NYU. And the next part isn't so happy. She saw women throwing themselves out of the factory. There was a fire. This was the famous Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911. 150 people died, almost all of them young immigrant women who had been locked in the factory because they shouldn't take unwarranted breaks. Nor were the fire precautions in place, so they couldn't get out. They jumped out of the building and fell to the ground. But Frances Perkins was ready. She wasn't happy about what she saw, but she was ready. She had been working with legislators, with labor unions, with social reformers to create occupational health and safety legislation and other social protections for workers. And when this disaster happened and became so well publicized, they went to work and they passed in New York State the first protective labor legislation of any importance in this country and one of the first places in the world. Tonight, I want to talk to you about the disasters that we might face, about the opportunities and the hard choices that are in front of us now. There is a real debate going on about technology and AI and about the number of jobs that will be gained or lost over time. No one really knows what's going to happen. We have guesses, but no one's really sure, except for one thing we're sure about. There will be huge displacements, and we need to be prepared for that. That's the disaster that we're going to face and that we have to be prepared for. So some jobs will be lost, and some of those we're very glad they'll be lost. Telemarketers, now if we could get rid of the robot calls that have replaced the telemarketers, that's not such a big loss. But if you look down this list, taxi drivers are in trouble. So are Uber drivers and Lyft drivers going into the future. Some jobs will be safe from automation, but none of that will be enough. The big question tonight is really, what do we do for those who are put out of work? How are we going to think about that? How are we going to help us, who may find ourselves displaced in the future? Now, one answer is to create new jobs. That's part of the answer. And here's some of the new jobs that might be created. Some of them are exciting new opportunities. Some of them are jobs that have, in a sense, been around for a while and are going to become more important. I spent a lot of years working with longshore workers on the ports, and they were replaced to a large extent by containerization. But now there are a lot of jobs at the port. But who are they? They're the repair people for the containers. We're going to have to think about old jobs and rethink them. One of the things I really want to emphasize is that the future we have to think about not just creating work. There'll always be work. As long as there are things that need to be done, there will be work, as my friend Tim O'Reilly says, and I agree with him. But will that work be jobs? Will it be compensated work? Will it have dignity and respect? Will it be valued? If we think about some of the jobs that have been around for a long, long time, they are jobs that have not been given the value or the compensation that they should be. We are going to be increasingly dependent on education, not just teachers in schools as we know them now, but more teachers, more schools, and lots of training and retraining as we go forward. We're all going to get old. We've all once been young or have the young. Every one of us will be sick at some point in our life. Care providers are going to become increasingly important, and that not all of them will be machines. Some will. But are they being given the dignity, respect, and pay that they deserve? Hopefully, we'll have more green industries into the future. There'll always be creatives. And I don't just mean Hollywood stars and pop performers, but we're going to need lots of artists, lots of singers, lots of actors who will bring joy into our lives and will think about the world in a different way, writers who will inspire us. And I personally would love to see the introduction of a new civilian conservation corps, another FDR idea, to help us rebuild the infrastructure that is failing and to build new infrastructure that we'll need into the future. Are we ready for that future? Not yet. New jobs or old, we are going to have to develop very new and different and old capacities. We're going to have to develop our cognitive capacities even more than we've done in the past. Again, back to education and training. We're also going to have to develop our emotional capacities. If you look at the statistics in the literature, the capacity to relate to other people is going to become increasingly important into the future. This means we have to reimagine our education, our training, the way in which we learn and interact with each other, and new ways to support people to learn what they need and when they need it, and to give it to them. So we're going to have hard choices to make going into the future. If we don't intervene, the rich will get richer, and the middle class, already disappearing, will totally disappear. If we do act, we can make sure that the world is a much more decent place, one that provides social supports for those who need it when they need it, that provides the kind of education and training we're all going to need. What we need is a new moral political economy. The current political economy dates from the 1970s, brought into being by Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and President Ronald Reagan. Their values and their presumptions and those of their favorite economists were what really created the construct that we call a political economy, what informs our lives as citizens, as those who run firms, that tells government what it should and shouldn't do. And their values and presumptions and assumptions were that we as individuals are narrowly self-interested, that that's our major and main motivation, that we're perfectly rational, capable of making absolutely the right decision, and that markets can solve every problem. Now, we're going to need new ideas and new intellectual leadership going forward. And what I hope is that we don't rely on Pepper or a more advanced AI to do that thinking for us, that we do it. And we've already made some progress with some great human beings doing the thinking. These are 3 Nobel economists who have brought into being more realistic theories of behavior to inform our political economies. Richard Thaler and Danny Kahneman have shown us that something that's hardly surprising, that we are imperfect decision makers. We are not fully rational. What a surprise. Eleanor Ostrom, who is one of my mentors and friends and who I miss every day, she's now deceased, taught us that we are social and creative beings who build communities and find solutions to common problems. Now, change is going to require new aspirations and new actions. We've got to get out and vote. We've got to create a social infrastructure that really will do the work for us and help us build a diverse and real community. Promote a value structure that elevates both the need for survival and recognizes the need for dignity. And develop models and arguments about who's going to pay for all of this. And then advocate for the approach we prefer. Now, we want a world where people can have dignity and meaning as they work, that they can grow old, they can be young, they can change, they can be sick. But that requires somebody to pay. Robots could pay, that's a possibility. We could soak the rich, That's another possibility. Or we could come up with a new and more imaginative and informed ideas about how to actually make this work. What I want to advocate is a new moral political economy that is really about well-being and flourishing. In my mind is Siena City Hall. There's a fabulous mural there from the 14th century of a walled city that is safe and secure, and people are dancing outside the walls, and crops are growing, and there's a lively market inside. We need that vision of good government, of a good society that's teched up for today. Now, Frances Perkins is in my head and my heart, and I want to be ready, and I'm doing what I can as a wonky academic to get ready for the future so that we can deal with those disasters that we know are going to come and mitigate and be prepared for those we can't predict. My great-grandnephews, these two young 4-year-old twins there, are already working for a better world and advocating for children, refugee children, all children. I want the world to be a place where they can thrive. They don't need to become professors, doctors, venture capitalists, technologists, lawyers. But whatever they do, and I suspect it will be many different things over their lifetime, I want them to have respect and dignity and to be paid for it. And I want them to continue to work for the collective good. And I want you all to help me help them do that. Thank you.